Welcome to Conversations with Melissa, part of RenaFi's Experts and Influencer series. RenaFi provides practical, research-based advice, courses, and peer support, and focuses on the underlying drivers of our ADHD behavior. Through courses like budgeting for the ADHDer, home organizing for the ADHD lifestyle, and of course, our ADHD book club, to name just a few, we provide a holistic program that serves to help you thrive with ADHD, not in spite of it. Follow our YouTube channel for ADHD resources and information, and visit us at renafi.com to learn what we have to offer. Okie doke. Thank you so much, RenaFi. All right, and then thank you so much to our guests here, Dr. Bill Dodson and Beth Bardeen. So today we're going to do RSD from two perspectives. We have Dr. William Dodson, the clinician, what RSD looks like from the outside in. Dr. Dodson is a board-certified adult psychiatrist who does not have ADHD. He has worked with his adult ADHD patients for the last 25 years to understand and document rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Dr. Dodson has been on the forefront of diagnostic and treatment reform for ADHD and rejection sensitivity dysphoria. He is now retired from clinical practice and resides in Colorado. Beth Bardeen, the RSD survivor, what RSD feels like from the inside out. Beth is an adult diagnosed with ADHD after a 30-year career in the Seattle tech industry, specializing in marketing and organizational behavior. Now Beth researches rejection sensitivity dysphoria and is an advocate for the newly diagnosed, with a focus on explaining the internal experience of RSD. She lives in Seattle and is the founder of the Seattle chapter of CHAD. All right, thank you both for being here. And
Melissa, thank you.
I'm just going to step out of the way. I'm going to take the focus off me and let you have at it and interrupt you every so often.
Sure. And thank you, Rick and RenaFi too. This is, we love this opportunity, really appreciate it.
There are three different terms out there. They mean three totally different things. They have three different sources, three different treatments, and yet many people use them interchangeably. So I would like to clarify those terms just so we know what we're talking about when we talk to each other. Next one.
Oops, too fast. There we go.
There we go. We still, even though in Europe they're using it as a core diagnostic feature of ADHD, we still have not really come down on a definition of it, and people use totally different words. Unless Barkley, again, as he does everything, views it as an expression of executive function deficits. Frederick Reimer, who was one of the two people who originally described ADHD and who is still working and publishing and doing this great work in his late 80s, really, I think, has the best touch on it. It's the lability of moods, it's the unpredictability of moods, the overreaction of moods, and especially temper tantrums, which are what really disturb other people a lot. Yeah, and as he has pointed out in several studies, this lack of control of one's own emotions is the most impairing part of ADHD. Most people, by the time they get into high school, have found ways to get around their academic and work performance, but not the fact that they can't control their emotional lives. He did the world a great service by pointing out that these mood explosions are not due to comorbidities or coexisting conditions. This is something that's part of ADHD itself, and it responds to stimulant class medications. So for somebody who's adolescent is having meltdowns, the first thing I'd ask was, has his medication worn off, or even taking medication? The medication can basically get a person not having these meltdowns in 60% of the cases. So medication is probably a very quick, simple, and multifaceted thing to do. Steve Ferrone, who is probably the intellectual thought leader in the United States, again, sees it in terms of anger, temper, irritability, rages, and things like that. What none of them do is that they don't see it as exaggeration of normal. Everybody on this panel, everybody listening in, everybody you know, has lost their temper at some point in time. And we're much more likely to do it when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we don't like the other person, when we feel insulted. So, for a matter of degree here, we're talking about universal experiences, just that the intensity is really beyond description. Beth, next slide. Next slide. There is a thing out there, rejection sensitivity. People say, well, couldn't this be due just to having been rejected 1,000 times in your life and it makes you oversensitive? And the answer is absolutely. There's a very good study by Michael Jelenic, showed that by the time a person with ADHD reached their 10th birthday, they had heard 20,000 additional negative or corrective messages in school alone. So we're not even counting home and coaches and people like that. 20,000. Now, there are two studies to show that by the time an ADHD child reaches the third grade, 70% do not have a friend. So yes, people with ADHD have more than their share of experience with rejections. But this is something that's unique because it comes from things that happen to us. If you look at most of the conditions in the DSM, these are things which are strongly genetic. They run in families. They are episodic. They come and go for no apparent reason. And these are the ones in our diagnostic nomenclature that have a chance of responding to medication. Here, what we're talking about is basically post-traumatic stress disorder. Only I think the new unofficial term is complex PTSD because it happens repeatedly over and over and over again, where now we misinterpret the events of our lives. We misinterpret neutral events as being in rejections. Because rejection sensitivity, no dysphoria, just that term, is a situation that comes from events that happen to us. They generally don't get any benefit at all from medications. There are no good medications for PTSD. So again, different origin, same experience, but no treatment in this particular case. Beth, could you move it forward for me? So rejection sensitive dysphoria, how does that differ? Well, we think it's very genetic because it seems to be an integral part of ADHD. In fact, that's what first study we have out trying to get it published right now is to show that people who would endorse rejection sensitivity disorder, dysphoria criteria also have ADHD, and people who don't have ADHD don't endorse it. But again, that has not yet been published. In my own personal practice of about 3,000 patients, when I ask them the question above, for your entire life, have you always been much more sensitive than other persons you know to rejection, teasing, criticism, or your own perception that you failed or fallen short? 98% of them answered a strong yes. Half burst into tears. This is something that really strikes people with ADHD. And about a third of my patients said that rejection sensitivity was the most impairing part of their ADHD. Beth, will you advance it for us? In the definition of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it's important that you be very rigorous and exact about what you're calling RSD. Emotional dysregulation, the first one we talked about, is found literally in every diagnosis. Everybody with depression loses control of their emotion. Everybody with bipolar, everybody with anxiety, everybody with with borderline personality disorder, has trouble regulating and controlling their own emotions. So the emotional dysregulation is something that is genetic and is found in all of these highly genetic conditions. Um, but it's not specific. It's found everywhere. It does nicely respond to stimulant class medication. So there are 12 features that are found almost always. These first 6 are found always. There's always a trigger, and that's important because we have to separate this from a mood disorder like depression or bipolar or something like that, where there's never a trigger for the episode. There are a limited number of triggers: rejection, teasing, criticism, perception of failure. In other words, anytime you perceive that someone has withdrawn their love, their approval, or respect. Now, the moods match the person's perception of the trigger. Again, this separates it from mood disorders, where the moods have a life of their own, where there's no trigger to match up with, and the moods just come and go as they please. The change from one mood to another is instantaneous. So one of my patients said he had just enough time to say, "oh shit," before he was deeply into an episode of RSD, where if you look again at mood disorders, the onset is very gradual, measured in weeks to months, and then that has to last at least 2 weeks, and then takes weeks to months to go back to normal. People with RSD can have multiple episodes in that period of time. People talk about when they internalize a mood, it does look like depression. Again, it doesn't have a single criteria for a diagnosis of a mood disorder. If it's externalized, it is externalized in a white rage at the person or situation that wounded them so severely. I had a professional football player with road rage who bent his steering wheel double in a road rage. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about yelling out the window at somebody. And number 6, the pain is often physical as well as emotional. Next.
Oh, come on. Sorry. The numbering's off. My bad.
Oh, so didn't notice that. The age of onset, this is reported by about 90%, not everybody. Usually it's reported in early childhood, but may not appear until adolescence. This is an important one. People can't find the words to describe the intensity. Now, this is the most intense emotional experience of their lives, and they cannot find a single word to describe it. All they can do is describe the intensity. It's horrible, it's terrible, it's catastrophic, I can't stand it. So it's something so primitive, I guess, that it comes from a time before there's really words to express it. People commonly report being completely cut off from the rest of the world. They're totally alone. And they feel as if they'll never be reintegrated into the world. They're in a different dimension. And again, once the episode starts, people can't control them. So again, with RSD, it's genetic. It's very specific, has very specific criteria, and responds usually more than half the time to medication. So these are 3 very different conditions. People with ADHD have won the negative genetic lottery in that usually they have all 3. When was the last time as an ADHD person you caught a break? So could you advance the slide for me, please? and we've already talked about those. So take-home messages. These are three different things, and it really helps to tease those apart because it tells us what to do. With all of these, again, the key is prevention. You don't know what's coming, so you have to lead a life in balance. And ACT therapy is wonderful for that, as is CBT, DBT. But you have to be prepared to diminish the frequency of these events. Move on. So missing RSD, and most clinicians are going to miss it. The problem is that a lot of times they're going to be very dismissive. They're going to do all the things that they shouldn't do. They don't treat you with respect or even polite curiosity. They will exclude your life experience because it doesn't happen to be in the psychiatric literature yet. The medical references to rejection sensitivity dysphoria would be found under atypical or non-typical depression. And that's why I've been emphasizing so much that this does not have a single feature of a mood disorder. It is not depression. The unanswered question here when they were doing rejection, when they were first doing it, was that what they really were seeing was not depression, an atypical depression, but ADHD and not recognizing it. Next. We tried to separate how you can tell RSD from depression, from anxiety, from borderline. Why don't we do borderline first because it was asked about. Borderline is a personality structure. It's unstable, and it's usually described as a profound sense of emptiness most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time. And it's intensely affected by the way other people treat them, or their experience of how other people treat them. And the key word that you hear from people who are borderline is they feel that the other person has walked away from them. They've abandoned them. They've left them behind. Whereas people with RSD tend to feel that they've been pressed out. They're the ones who are being pushed away, not having somebody leaving them. Depression, we've already talked about. Anxiety. People with ADHD tend to misuse the word anxiety to begin with. The definition of anxiety is a baseless, apprehensive fear. For no particular reason, the person feels as if something awful is just about to happen. That's what an anxiety disorder is. And so people who have anxiety disorders are going to have physical symptoms, trembling, shaking, sweating, chest tightness, which can proceed into panic attacks. And they also will have an avoidance of things they associate with where they had their panic attacks. And that's where we get phobias. People with rejection sensitivity rarely, if ever, do it. I have not seen it. Bipolar, again, bipolar and ADHD share 16 features in common, but we really don't care what they share in common. What we want to know is how they are different so that we can tell the difference. So again, bipolar mood disorder is a mood disorder. It has no triggers. It comes and goes for no apparent reason. It slowly comes. By definition, must stay for at least 2 weeks, and then it slowly leaves over weeks to months. And usually there's no correlation between the mood and anything that's going on in the person's life.